What up, y'all? It's Dev here to bring it home for Bloomburrow preview season. Now, according to Mythic Spoiler, as I'm recording this video, still a couple of cards left to spoil. We will get to those, and I'll tell you when in just a minute. But for now, we've got like 20 cards plus to look over today, and I'm surprised, honestly. Again, for the day that's supposed to be the last day, we expect to see a bunch of garbage, but there's actually a fair number of rares today, not to mention a bunch of good uncommons and stuff. So let's get right into it if you don't mind. But first, actually, sorry, a quick note, I may have alluded to it a second ago there. Any cards that come out between now and tomorrow, we will get to when we do our full set speed run over on Twitch on Thursday evening. That's July the 18th. Tomorrow, as I record this, we should get on about 6:30 or 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's a little earlier than we normally do, but Bloomburrow is a big set. I got a lot to say about it. It's going to take forever to review, and I want some of you to be able to actually finish the review before your bedtime. So we're going to take the Twitch a little bit earlier than usual tomorrow to do our speed run. Follow if you feel like it, or you can just wait for it because I'm going to release it here on YouTube right after. But anyway, that's all I've got to talk about for now. There are cards today, a ton of them actually, so let's go. Let's kick things off on the last day with Druid of the Spade and Alania's Pathmaker. Now, Druid of the Spade is 3 mana. It's doing a green for a 2/3 rabbit Druid. I guess that makes sense. As long as you control a token, Druid gets +2/+0 and has trample. I wish I could dig up something I liked about this in Standard, but honestly, even though a 3 mana 4/3 trample might make your long ears perk up, you can just do way better than this, I think, in most decks. Now, in Limited, we're definitely talking about it. We're having a little discussion. It's a polite chat, you know what I mean? So I will say this is a decent common in Limited because there's tokens just going around everywhere, and this is at a slightly better rate than we see a lot of the 3-drops in this set, so keep that in mind. Now, Alania's Pathmaker over here kind of makes me laugh. It's 4 mana, 3 and a red for a 4/2 Otter Wizard, and when it enters, you exile the top card of your library. Till the end of your next turn, you may play that card. Well, this has the correct text on it, I guess. It's till the end of your next turn, so you do get to untap and still have like time and mana to play the card. So I don't know, it's kind of not terrible again in Limited where it's an okay common, I guess. You always want card advantage, and this basically replaces itself right as you play it. And so it could get worse, right? But honestly, I think the best thing about this is the image of this otter just stomping around like boom, 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 like shaking up the ground. I'm pretty sure everything happening in this card art is in his imagination. That's why I love him. We also got to see Bellowing Crier and Treeguard Duo yesterday. Now, I'll start with Treeguard Duo, actually. This is 4 mana, 3 and a green for a 3/4 frog rabbit. And when it enters, until end of turn, target creature you control gains vigilance and gets +X/+X, where X is the number of creatures you control. Now, when I first read this card, I was ready to put it in like the upper echelon of uncommons for the day and maybe even the set because I thought it was crater hoofing. I thought that like all your creatures got this bonus. That has not happened. It's just one guy. Gets +X/+X and vigilance, not tramples. Boo. I don't know. If you can like fashion a deck with a whole bunch of creatures or token creatures and stuff like that, then like maybe you get a huge dude through. There are multiple guys in this set that can go unblocked. So I guess there's that. I forgot to point that out for Starforged Sword yesterday. I mean, I guess that goes on unblockable guys. And like, this can help that happen. And like, Simic is a color combination that's got a bunch of unblockable dudes. I don't know. I'm just trying to spitball here because I actually do want to like this card, but it's probably a card I should not like. So, you know, I've learned my lesson. Let's move on to Bellowing Crier here. 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a 2/1 Frog Advisor. And when it enters, you draw a card and then you discard a card. So interesting considering this is a common 2-drop with a not embarrassing power stat, you know, that'll go in a bunch of Limited decks that actually helps out not just frogs, but it does help out frogs tremendously. We're trying to look for common and cheap frogs that have entered the battlefield triggers that can be repeated when we bounce them back to our hand with other frogs. So like, this is a great little like signposty, like breadcrumb, and really bread and butter. Or just common for the set that you're going to be drafting a lot, but not just because frogs. This also helps out threshold strategies. It helps out forage strategies, and it does appear as though wizards want you to choose like 2 creature types and slam them together and make them kiss or whatever, you know, and like take advantage of the different things those you know creature types do in the Limited environment. And like frogs and squirrels kind of makes a little bit of sense, right? You want to forage, so this helps you put cards in your yard. I like that. You know, you can do frogs and rats because there's blue rats and blue frogs, obviously. So yeah, another thing that wants you to put cards in your yard for threshold. blue-black rats. So this works in that too. I just kind of like the intersection this meets at. We're seeing that with a lot of cards in this set for limited specifically, and I think that's just really good design overall. But next, let's look at Raccoon Rallier and Agate Blade Assassin. Now, Raccoon Rallier is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 2/2 Raccoon Bard. You can tap him to have a creature you control gain haste till end of turn. Do it as a sorcery. We've seen a bunch of cards like this in the past. It's not the first one we've seen. I guess this is the first Raccoon Bard to pretty irrelevant creature types when it really comes down to it, you know. So I'm not sure how great the card is, but in limited, this is a card that you want to have access to a good bit, especially if your bomb has a sweet attacks trigger or is just a huge flyer or whatever's going on. So I don't know. I always like drafting cards like this, but I wouldn't draft too many. That said, you guys remember when a 2 mana 2/2, back in my day, in case you're like a younger or newer Magic player, a 1 red 2/2 was like a huge deal a few years ago. We just literally never saw that. So power creep, still, I guess I'll take it. You know, this is a card you will draft sometimes. But so is Agate Blade Assassin. This is 2 mana, 1 and a black for a 1/3 Lizard Assassin. And when it attacks, defending player loses a life and you gain a life. Okay, dude, this again, just like Bellowing Crier, this sits at the intersection, the crossroads, so you won't be lonely. I have to do it every time I say crossroads. But anyway, this sits at the crossroads of a bunch of different limited strategies, not just lizards, right? Lizards is a deck that wants to play cheap lizards, which this is one, and it also wants to be able to attack safely, which this kind of does with the 3 toughness, right? And it also wants to deal this kind of incremental damage to opponents, which this does. You know, you get a free damage whenever it attacks. So it's almost a 2 mana 2/3, not really, but kind of almost a 2 mana 2/3 lifelink. You know, it's getting there. But this also helps out the Bats deck like tremendously. There's a bunch of cards in the Bats deck that want you to not only have gained life, but also for someone to have lost life. There are cards in Bats that want you to have lost life too, but there's a few cards in this set that want your opponent to have lost life that turn and they do something else. So it's kind of a spectacle type ability, if you remember that from like Light Up the Stage. Really interesting card, again, mostly for limited, where I think it's a 2-drop that will benefit like multiple strategies. I don't think it does anything outside of limited, pretty obviously, but again, like it's not, I guess it is technically every day that you see this, but it's not every day you see so many in one set, sort of perfectly designed commons for limited that just work with so many different archetypes you can cook up. So I like it. But the, I guess, cusp common of the day, like the one that comes between the is all right for limited commons and uncommons and the actual like decent let's talk about them commons and uncommons is Psychic Whorl here. This is 3 mana, 2 and a black for a sorcery. Target opponents discards 2 cards. Then if you control a rat, surveil 2. Strictly Better Mind Rot, and like you see one of these in like every few sets. Like just yesterday I was talking about how there's like 50 or more slots in every single set taken up by cards that more or less already existed, just with like very slight tweaks. And we see them over and over and over. And the Mind Rot is one of them. Mind Rot with a tweak is one of them. In this case, though, they're getting better. I swear they're getting better, dude. Like Go Blank was probably the best one ever printed and actually saw standard play and stuff. This one I'm not sure actually will, but if you do, you know, happen to have a rat out, which is easy to do in standard while not playing bad cards. Like even if you don't count Bloomburrow, like Lord Skitter's in standard, there's plenty of decent rats, right? So, okay. But yeah, Surveil 2. So this again in limited will fuel Threshold, it'll fuel Forage, and all that is really, really sweet. Fuels reanimation strategies, just fixes your draws and like making your opponent get rid of 2 cards in their hand and making sure your next draw is like super fire. That's, come on, dude. That's actually not a terrible Magic card, really. But I do think this is mostly confined to limited where it could do some work. You'd be surprised how good Mind Rot is, especially in sealed. But let's look at the good cards in quotation marks. So I guess what does Dev think is good today? We'll look at Wildfire Howl and Rabid Gnaw here. Now, Wildfire Howl is tricky. It's not, it's probably not as good as I want it to be, but it's still a red sweeper, right? It's 3 mana, 1 and 2 red for a sorcery. You can gift a card if you choose to. Wildfire Howl deals 2 damage to each creature. If the gift was promised, instead Howl deals 1 damage to any target and 2 damage to each creature. So you can take down a 3 toughness thing if you promise to give them a card. So Again, probably one of the better limited playable cards of the day, but not quite standard playable in a standard that includes like Brotherhood's End, which is just a much better card than this, all things considered. Unless you're playing a bunch of 3 toughness creatures, like there's a way you can break the symmetry and make this technically better than Brotherhood's End, but I think 9 times 10, you just play Brotherhood's End. But still, I will say that in limited, this blows up a lot of stuff, dude. This blows up a ton of 3 drops rather. There's a lot of 3/2s in this set. There's a bunch of 3 mana 2/2s in this set. There's obviously a ton of offspring tokens and a lot of tokens just in general that have 1 to 2 toughness. So this should really do a lot of damage to a board state in limited. So keep your eyes peeled for it there. But again, I'm not sure that when we have stronger options that it makes the jump to standard, but it's going to be in standard for a while, so let's just remember it's an option. A Rabid Gnaw has some art. This is 2 mana, 1 and a red for an instant. Okay. Target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Then it deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control, with no conditions whatsoever. I actually think that this is hot in like any spells deck, mono red Slickshot with Monastery Swiftspear and Fugitive Codebreaker, that whole thing. But you can add green to that deck, you can add blue to that deck, you can add white to that deck if you're whatever you want to do. You know what I mean? Like if you want to add black to it, I'm sure there's ways to make that happen. How come you never see a Rakdos version of that deck? I'm sure it's doable, but anyway, yeah, this might slot directly in. Like it's a removal spell. Cool. It's a 2 mana instant speed removal spell, but also triggers Slickshot. And like when it does trigger Slickshot, you're effectively giving the creature +3/+0 and the bite effect. So it can take down a bunch of stuff, dude. I think this is like automatically playable. I don't know how many copies that you play, but it's definitely something I want to like redshirt in these like Slickshot decks, because I think it almost certainly gets a couple of slots in the deck. But I might be freaking out too much. I just think this is too perfect of a card for that deck. But obviously when we get to limited, this is just a instant speed bite effect. So you play it in everything. Plus you just get the free +1/+0. Like even small guys take down relatively large guys, depending on how things shake out power wise. I don't know, dude. I think this is one of the better looking bite effects I've ever seen in some ways. And it's kind of weird that it's red, but I'll take it. I guess speaking of removal, just while we're on that train, let's look at Sonar Strike, and I guess we'll throw Spellgyre up here too. Sonar Strike is 2 mana, 1 and a white for an instant that deals 4 damage to target attacking, blocking, or tapped creature. You gain 3 life if you control a bat. So this one does have a condition on it, but that condition is fine, especially again, considering even if you factor out Bloomburrow entirely, it's possible you'll have a Deep Cavern Bat on the table. That's like the best 2-drop black creature in standard. And I don't really see too much changing that in this set, right? So Sonar Strike works well if you have that out, but there's plenty of bats that you can play without being like too upset with yourself once the set comes out. But even if you don't have a bat out, like you don't hate yourself putting this into your deck, right? 4 damage for 2 mana at instant speed to a creature that's doing just about anything, man. Like it can even be vigilant. It can even be a boat, and like you can blow it up. And 4 damage is a lot. Doesn't kill Sheldrids, and I completely understand that, but it does just about bust up every other possible option, whether it's attacking, defending, or just like hanging out, trying to do a cool thing. So I think this is a better removal spell than this type of removal spell typically looks like. We see these 1/2 mana white deal a damage or more to an attacking or blocking creature. We see these like all the time. This is another one they print constantly, but this is actually a really, really good looking version of this effect, considering we got a little bit more damage than we normally do, and it's not just an attacker. It's all kinds of creatures, right? So I don't know, a little bit better than it looks perhaps. Also has kind of a sick name, right? Sonar Strike, I like that. But we'll move on to Spellgyre here. 4 mana, 2 and 2 blue for an instant. Choose 1, either counter target spell or surveil 2, and then draw 2 cards. Is this actually okay? Is this kind of okay? Like, we've been wondering what we replace Memory Deluge with in standard, and we've all been like, well, Farsight Ritual and Intrude on the Mind, and these are good cards. Quick Study's fine, and like, there's some good card draw spells in standard, but honestly, this is pretty good. When you get right down to it, you don't want to spend 4 mana to counter a spell, but you will if you have to, but you will spend 4 mana to draw 2 with upside And this is definite upside. You can fuel graveyard strategies. You can just fix your draws if you'd rather do that. You know, you can just put whatever you want on top and put one in the graveyard. It's just, Surveil is a really, really good ability. And obviously in Limited, this does, you know, all the stuff I've been saying Surveil does for the last couple of videos. But in Standard, we've got 2 4-mana holes in blue-white right now, the blue-white control deck, because we lose Wandering Emperor, we lose Memory Deluge, and I'm actually like throwing an eye this thing's way, man. I don't think it's too bad. It stands a chance. But last couple of unks here, we got to look at Flame Bolt Gecko and Eddie Merc Crab, which might actually be really good. But Flame Bolt Gecko is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 2/2 Lizard Warlock. And when it enters, if an opponent lost life this turn, add black-red. Okay, there's more printed on this card, by the way. If you pay 1 and a red and discard a card, you can draw a card. Cool, man. So I can just use its ability the turn it comes into play. But what this actually is like a Burning Tree Emissary. And again, because it has this activated ability, you can always spend the mana on something. You know, like if you don't have a card in your hand, I guess you can't, but it is cool that like you'll never reach the end of a Burning Tree Emissary chain with like 2 more mana left that you can't do anything with, which always feels kind of crappy, you know. It's just cool that it gives you a sink. Also cool, as some people have already pointed out, I can't take credit for this, but you know, we're a community, we put our heads together. This, unlike a Burning Tree Emissary, can be cost reduced, you know, anything that reduces the cost of lizards or warlocks or creatures by 1 mana. Suddenly this is generating mana, which is really gross, actually. It also produces mana, you know, a black mana and a red mana. Like, you're not getting colorless mana at all off of this, and that's a kind of a big deal, too. So, whew, this is a good card, man. But I think Eddie Merc Crab might also be a pretty amazing Magic card. I may be way off here, but Eddie Merc, it sounds kind of vaguely Mafia to me, mostly because Merc means kill, and the guy's name is Eddie. You know, Eddie Merc! Eddie Merc Crab over here is 7 mana, 5 and 2 blue for a 5/5 elemental crab with flash. It costs 1 less to cast for each instant and sorcery in your graveyard, and it enters tapped if it's not your turn. When it enters, tap up to 2 target creatures. So I have a feeling that this card is busted. Really good, dude. Because I've, you know, and we all have, I mean, actually, that's not true. 30% of you, as we have established, and you guys were very clear in the comments section, it may be more than 30%. 30% of you don't play Magic anymore. So maybe you haven't played against Tolarian Terror, but I've played against Tolarian Terror. And yeah, this will always cost, even at the floor, the ceiling, you know what I mean? It'll always cost twice as much as a Tolarian Terror. You know, no matter what, but I still think that it's probably worth it considering the flash and tempo the card is giving you, dude. It is not going to be hard to get 5 instants or sorceries in your yard. We do it all the time, man. So, like, I'm not sure this makes mono blue tempo like the best deck in Standard day 1, and I don't want to say all that, but I do think this is a pretty welcome addition to the deck, bro. So, you know, in case you didn't already have enough creatures for the deck, or you felt like the deck needed a couple of more creatures, then I think this is fantastic, man. Man, it's kind of amazing I never said in a pinch when reviewing this card. Like, in a pinch, you can tap down 2 guys, swing through, you know. That would have been the joke to use. I apologize for not doing it, but I'm trying to make it up to you. Let's move on to the rares. That might help. You guys like seeing rares on the last day of the previous season. Let's open things up here with Storm Chaser's Talent. A single blue mana for a class. When it enters, you create a 1/1 blue and red otter creature token with prowess. That's pretty good. On level 2, you pay 3 and a blue. That rhymed. Bars, when this class becomes level 2, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Level 3 costs 6 mana, 5 and a blue. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 blue and red otter creature token with prowess. So that's pretty sweet line of text right there. You know, you get kind of like a Monastery Mentor or like something like that, right? But it costs you so much more than a Monastery Mentor. What are you paying, 11 mana to get to that last ability in installments? But that's so much. But if you ever can make it pop off, it's a fun ability. But really, I just like that this is a 1-mana 1/1 with prowess that also comes packaged with an enchantment. It gives you a token. You might want that. There's plenty of ways to leverage tokens in this set and in standard at large, you know. Level 2 is 4 mana, yes, but it's actually decent card selection. You just grab like the best thing in your yard, and now you have access to a counter or a removal spell or another sweeper, or like whatever you're looking for, right? So I think there's a lot to love about this card. You know, the entry fee of a single mana for a 1/1 prowess is actually all right, dude. So I'm kind of into it. This is technically, I guess you could say, my least favorite rare of the day, but that does not mean it's bad. But while we're looking at talents and classes and all that, let's look at Caretaker's talent. This is 3 mana, 2 and a white, and whenever one or more tokens you control enter, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. For a single white mana, you can level this up to level 2. When it becomes level 2, you create a token that's a copy of a token that you already control. If you want to level this up to level 3, it'll cost you 4 mana, 3 and a white. Creature tokens you control get +2/+2. Now, probably the most important thing to point out about this is that it doesn't say creature tokens entering the battlefield. It's just whenever any token at all enters the battlefield under your control. So that's great. Clues and food and all that stuff. Treasure tokens, obviously. And anytime you like use shenanigans to make a token copy of an artifact or something like that, you know, and this card actually works really well in those decks that are doing those shenanigans, right? Because for just a single white mana, you can create a token copy of any token you control. So if you have succeeded in turning like a funky card type, like an enchantment or artifact, into a token, then again, for a single white mana, that's a steal to make yet another funky token copy of that. I'm kind of a huge fan of this, and even though I think 3 mana is a bit much on the ground floor, you know, Takasia's Welcome. Is this just a better Takasia's Welcome in a way? Ultimately, they do care about different things, so they're not necessarily the same card, but I do think they can be judged against one another. I think this might come out on top. That makes it a pretty good Magic card. But next, let's meet Valley Flamecaller. 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 3/3 Lizard Warlock. If a lizard, mouse, otter, or raccoon you control will deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage +1 instead. So be on the lookout not for creatures just of this type, but also changelings when we get them again, that can like tap to deal a damage to something, or, you know, something along those lines that don't have to attack to deal damage, right? Or maybe they deal damage as part of an attack's trigger, for perhaps, right? So all of those get a little bit better with this dude kind of lurking around. I do like this. I think this is a neat little like aggro 3-drop for standard that'll ensure that when you drop this, yeah, sure, it doesn't have haste, but it'll still have an effect on the table the turn you drop it, right? Your 1 and 2 drops will suddenly get in for more damage. I like that there are a few cards like this, and a lot of them are 3-drops from what I am perceiving, if my brain is working correctly, that work with 4 different spreads of creature types in this set. It's a little wonky, right? Because if you have like all 4 of these creature types, or even just 2 of these creature types you built your deck around, then you kind of don't want cards. Like, let's say I've got lizards and mice in my deck. I don't necessarily want a card that says all mice get +1/+1. Right? Because only half my deck is mice, so anthem effects and stuff like that, or mouse specific, aren't as good. So you do have to build your deck in like a specific way to play these kind of cards, but I still think it's going to be worth it some of the time. I just can't wait to like put all this stuff together and kind of see what good creature type decks we can build, because I think they've hit the nail on the head this time. And again, I've got more to say about this a little bit later in the video, but I just really like a lot of the design I'm seeing in this set. You know, it's not the typical like, I'll just play a bunch of mice in your deck, you know. Like, there are reasons to actually play a wide spread of creature types, and that's a good thing. So cool dude here, probably at least fun in draft, but I also kind of like him in standard, where, last thing, note that even if he does, you know, things do damage to creatures, and this guy's included, by the way, it doesn't say another, so he does include himself, but when they do damage in combat to creatures, they deal extra damage too, and that can mess up a lot of combat damage. So altogether, solid card. But next, let's take a look at Beastbinder, or perhaps Azure Beastbinder, depends on what site you're looking at. This is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a 1/3 rat rogue. It has vigilance, and it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or greater. Whenever Beastbinder attacks, up to 1 target artifact, creature, or planeswalker an opponent's controls loses all abilities until your next turn. If it's a creature, it has base power and toughness 2/2 until your next turn. Now, I want this to be phenomenal. but I am just not convinced that it actually is. It could be a massive sleeper, and maybe I'm not seeing it. Perhaps everyone else on the internet's talking about it, but I have not heard a peep about this rat today. But it is a rat, which is a somewhat relevant creature type, even again, Bloomburrow notwithstanding, but especially with Bloomburrow. It actually has an interesting kind of spread of abilities here where it really can't be blocked by a whole heck of a lot. It is harder for your opponent to have a 1-power creature than you might imagine. Especially one that can block, because, Mirrex tokens can't block, a lot of rat 1/1s can't block, so there's that too. But ultimately, I'm kind of talking myself into this guy, especially considering he's got the vigilance too, so he can block back. I like some things about him, but ultimately, I'm not sure that he's high enough impact to really see the play I want him to. But I do recognize that they gave him the ability to hit 3 different permanent types, which is pretty cool, It's not too bad. And, shrink creatures some of the time. But in the early to mid game, I'm not sure how many things he's actually going to shrink or have a good target for or whatever. And, if he's just attacking with no power buffs, like, congratulations on your potential 1 damage a turn. So I think the dude is tricky looking, and I think the dude has some work to do. I think he's potentially standard playable. He's got to find exactly the right home, unless he's just like busted always, but I'm not sure he's quite there. I feel like there's something I'm not seeing here, though. I have to admit, with this card, maybe people are going to fight me in the comments section or something, and it's way better than I think it is, because this is one of those cards you look at and you're like, that's good, right? Like, the more you look at it, you're like, is it though? So, I don't know. Maybe I'll horseshoe back around to thinking it's good here soon, and I'm open to discussion in the comments section. But I'm also open to moving on here to Dragonhawk, Fate's Tempest. This is 5 mana, 3 and 2 red for a 5/5 legendary bird dragon with flying. When Dragonhawk enters or attacks, exile the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 4 or greater. You may play those cards until your next end step. At the beginning of your next end step, Dragonhawk deals 2 damage to each opponent for each of those cards that are still exiled. So I think the point of this card is to try to hit him for like 6 damage on curve. Or something like that. Play a 4-power guy on 3, or at least, right? 4-power guy on 4, and this guy on 5. And even though you don't have any mana left over, you can still dome them for 6 EOT, and that's pretty good, You can potentially do even more damage than that if you've got real tricks available to you, but I'm not sure how easy that would be. I honestly think like the ability to bust through is pretty good on this card, but is not like Bone Horde Dracosaur just a better card in general than this, right? So I'm having a hard time saying that this definitely sees play, especially again with like just as good or potentially better 5-mana dragon options in standard, right? So it's kind of hard to say, but again, over the course of a couple of turns, this can deal enough damage to just put the game out of reach, even if it can't actually get in 4 damage. So I don't know, dude. I do like the card, but is the card playable? The jury's out. But we have made it to the top 3 rares and mythics of the day here, guys. And we'll start with Scrap Shooter. This is 3 mana, 1 and 2 green for a 4/4 Raccoon Archer with reach. You can also gift a card to your opponent. And if you do, when it enters the battlefield, you destroy an artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. Sometimes a card is so good that I can't help but like chuckle to myself a little bit while I'm reading it. And like, I honestly do that often, even if the card is bad. You can tell the card is either terrible, or there's a funny joke involved, or it's very good. So I guess it's kind of tough to really tell why I'm laughing when I'm reading a card. But in this case, I'm pretty sure it was easy to tell that like the more this card you read, the more you're like, what? What's it doing all of that for, Like it's a 3 mana 4/4, which is good. Just is a good rate. It has a keyword ability, and they didn't have to do that. It's an archer, so it has reach. I think that's the logic we're going off of, because at first my brain was like, why is a raccoon, why does it have reach? But it's an archer, so there you go. But a 4/4 reach for 3 mana is all the card actually has to do for me to be like, maybe. But they decided to make the card full on playable by also making it like a Reclamation Sage or a Nuktabi Orangutan, like a card that does those things. Enters the battlefield and busts something up is nuts. Like, yeah, it is worse than a Reclamation Sage in some ways, because Reclamation Sage doesn't give your opponent a card, right? But Reclamation Sage also isn't a 4/4 reach. So just put that in your pipe and think about it for a minute. Just altogether, dude, why would you not play this card? Like if you're building like, mono green Stompy or something, I guess you've got like Pugnacious Hammerskull and Pelucranos and the guy that's like 3 mana for 4/4 Toxic 2 or whatever he does with Trample. Like, in under the context of current standard, a 3 mana 4/4 might not be as special as it used to be, but when it has the ability to come down and break something, I think you probably play it over a lot of the other cards I just mentioned. So very, very good Magic card right here, and unbelievably good in Commander, and I shouldn't have to tell you that. You can promise the card to whoever you want to, and then blow up the best artifact or enchantment on the table, which does not belong to the player you promised a card to. So, Commander, this is very stupid that it even exists. So, good Magic card, dude. I've said it before this season, like sometimes the best thing you can say, the only thing you can say is, wow. That's good. That's about all I've got to say. The card is obviously busted. Next, we got to look at Cruel Claw's Heist here. This is 2 black mana for a sorcery where you can gift a card to your opponent. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. Exile that card. If the gift was promised, you may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. Yikes. So, like, if you've already Deep Cavern batted them, or you've already duressed them, and you already have the information that you need, and you know what's in their hand, then I feel like you're more likely to gift them the card. But if you haven't, then you're less likely to gift them the card. If you don't even know what you're playing against, right? Quite yet, it's turn 2, you're on the play, your opponent has 1 land on the table, and they played no cards. It's like, is it worth gifting them a card to be able to play one of their cards when I don't even know what they're playing with? So there is some interesting sort of thought experiments to do with a card like this, especially when you cast them on curve. But still, at the very floor of the card, it's still one of the... I won't say it's like the best discard effect I've ever seen in my life, It's basically Soul Search, but Soul Search is a really, really good Magic card that I played a bunch of times, and this is kind of a better Soul Search in most ways, because, if I get my opponent's Atraxa and now I can just play it for the whole rest of the game and it's like safely tucked away in exile over here where it can't be messed with, that seems pretty good. Same thing with just about every popular and played card in Standard. If I can rip your, Archangel of Wrath, or if I can rip your, Deep Cavern Bat even, because I went first, that seems pretty good. If I can get your Shelly out of your hand, I could go on all day. If I could take a good card out of your hand and play it later, absolutely I'm going to do that. If I can take the removal spell out of your hand so that you can't kill the Deep Cavern Bat, I'm going to play next turn. But also, I can have your removal spell to play on your Deep Cavern Bat. This is what Standard's going to be. Then that seems ridiculous and probably worth giving you a card some of the time. If I'm taking your Atraxa, I really don't care that I'm giving you a card. So, like, this is, again, just at the floor, I think it's a playable Magic card. And when it really pops off, you win the game, right? Your opponent has the card that they built their deck around in their hand. It turns out you can use that too. So I really think that this is something special. So Howl Dev, is there possibly a better or cooler or card you like more from today? Well, it's that third thing. And really the second thing too, that matters most here, because personal preference goes a long way when it's your YouTube channel. You'll see, you'll have a YouTube channel one day and there will be an obvious best card of the day, and you will still talk about a different card after that card because your personal preference matters. Let's take a look at Essence Channeler. This is 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 2/1 Bat Cleric. As long as you've lost life this turn, Channeler has Flying and Vigilance. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on Channeler. When Channeler dies, put its counters on target creature you control. My God. Just forget about the fact that it's a bat that doesn't have flying until you give it flying. I think that what it's actually trying to be here is like a statue that comes to life or something, just based on the art, but I don't know, and I don't care. We lose Voice of the Blessed. And I've said a lot of times in this pre-season, like even before previous season, that one of the biggest losses for me and for life gain decks, obviously, in the new Standard is going to be Voice of the Blessed. It's going to suck to not have that card. Well, this just is Voice of the Blessed. You can't get the Indestructible, but like in a lot of ways, it just kind of is Voice of the Blessed, but it's easier to cast. That's so awesome. It's got the Ajani's Pridemate text that we all love, the +1/+1 counter whenever you gain life. And it's got like Kyrion Beastcaller's text on it, like throw its counters on something else after it dies. the Ironwork Apprentice techs. There's a few cards in Standard, actually, right now that do this, but that's a pretty good line of techs, dude. Now, there are a lot of ways to exile it, and obviously it'll die to Sunfall and not put its counters on anything, because everything died, but it's still a pretty good line of techs to have access to. I'm not going to deny it. So 2 mana for this is great. I want to call every new Ajani's Pridemate that I see the new, like, best Ajani's Pridemate of all time. This is in the running, especially in a format where you can give it flying and vigilance really easy. One thing I haven't pointed out yet with all these bat cards that want you to lose life on your turn is that right now we have the full complement of Pain Lands in Standard, and we also have Thran Portal in Standard for what it's worth, and apparently it's worth slightly more now than it was before rotation. So not only in terms of making your mana for you and getting an untapped land for all these, like, you know, creature type aggro decks, but also for stuff like this. You know, it's pretty easy to lose life to your lands if you feel like it in Standard right now. So this dude should have flying and vigilance pretty easily, and just about all the bats that turn on when you lose life should definitely be able to turn on very easily just because of the mana base. So this is my favorite card of the day. I do think that, like, Heist is probably the most relevant card of the day. We saw a couple of cards that might be sleepers. That 3 mana 4/4 reach, bust up a thing, is really, really good, obviously, just like in a vacuum. There's nothing wrong with that card. But in terms of, like, how do I put this? Not only a card that I like a lot, but the exact card that one particular deck needed to stay alive finally gets that card. And yeah, we get to play with it for another 2-3 years, actually. So just a massive fan of not just the design here, but the fact that we get this card at all. They did the right thing. Just Amalia needed a buddy. She's going to miss voice, like, so much. And here, new friend. Sometimes an old friend moves out of town, you know, and it's really sad. But then sometimes new friend who looks suspiciously like your old friend moves into your old friend's house. Weird. Weird analogy, but that's basically what's happening here with this card, and I couldn't be happier about it. So altogether, man, that is all we've got for spoilers today. I just did another reload on Mythic Spoiler. Again, anything that is still not spoiled, we will get to tomorrow during our, like, full set review speed run thing. So make sure to follow on Twitch, or just be ready for that video to drop on YouTube late tomorrow night. Aside from that, though, final thoughts on Bloomburrow for now, at least. Again, there might be some big cards in the set we don't know about yet that change my opinions, but my basic opinions almost certainly are set in stone at this point. Again, we needed a powerful set here. I talked about that in the video I did right before the set came out about, like, things I want in... Excuse me. That was a real burp. Suppressed perfectly. I'm a professional and a gentleman. But yeah, I talked about how Bloomburrow needed to be more than just, like, a cute creature type set where we get a bunch of different, like, wombats and weasels and ferrets and stuff like that. We needed to actually be a strong set. We can't just let 4 sets leave Standard and that will take care of itself. Standard will take care of itself because of rotation. That we need actual good cards, and we got them. We got lots of strong cards, but the good thing is they're cards where creature type does occasionally matter, right? They're learning how to design cards where creature type matters, and the card is still good. The base version of the card is good. You know, if I don't have my Deep Cavern Bat out, my bat specific card is still very good, and that is an excellent way of designing Magic cards. The set does in some ways have the making of being like one of those all-time sets a few years from now, where you got people who say Bloomburrow's my favorite set. I bought in on Bloomburrow. It was my first set, and I still hold it fondly. We don't see a set like this every time a set comes out. OTJ, Murders at Karlov Manor, not even Lost Caverns, a set that I love, wasn't necessarily, it didn't feel like this. And I think rotation coming behind it like a tsunami is like helping, you know, this set feel like a big deal. I'll acknowledge that. But I gotta say, man, these last few sets, I saw a lot of people online being like, this is just a cowboy hat set. You know, this is just a true crime set, right? This is just another dinosaur set. We're getting sick of that at this point. You know, just go back to Ixalan, who cares? You know, so I saw a lot of like discontent about these last few sets that I just really haven't seen when it comes to Bloomburrow. Like, sure, there's the occasional person who can have their opinion that's like, I'm just not really into it. But I see a lot of hype for this set, and it's not just like, oh, they're making the set that I want to make aesthetically. They're making the set a lot of people want mechanically too. You know, these cards are no jokes, and there's cards that are not only going to affect Standard, but look like they might affect multiple formats aside from just Commander, right? But there's a lot of good Commander cards in here too. So again, I just think that they really just knocked it out of the park in a lot of ways, just from what I can tell with Bloomburrow. So those are kind of my 2 cents final thoughts for right now. I've got more to say, but I don't want to elongate this video too much more. I'm sure I'll have a lot more to say before it's all said and done. Remember, preview season's not over. Not only do we have the speedrun full set review tomorrow, but we've got the top 10 sleepers in the set, top 25 cards in the set, deck techs after that, all kinds of other Bloomburrow content besides just those things. So yeah, man, make sure you subscribe to the sandwich if you haven't done it yet. Now's the time to do it. Hit the bell for the notifications because there's still plenty of not just preview season really, but Bloomburrow season, which is something I haven't been this excited for a standard in a really long time. So I'm already cooking and it smells delicious. So if you want to be in the kitchen when we serve it, make sure you're subbed. Aside from that, like the video. It helps me out a lot. Puts it in more recommended feeds. I need that. You need that. Well, you don't need that, but you probably think it was cool, you know? Anyway, you'd be doing a good thing for a guy. You can check out the Patreon if you want to support the content around here, and if you want to vote on what decks we do first for Bloomburrow season when we actually get to the decks and the videos and all that. You can affect the course of YouTube history, in fact, by voting on the first deck of Bloomburrow season and every deck after that for just $1 a month. So you may also be privy to things like, you know, outtakes and stuff like that. I got some things cooking up on the Patreon too for the new season. But anyway, do it if you want to do it. It helps me out like tremendously. It's the only thing that keeps me doing this for a living. And I'd really like to continue doing it, to be honest. And from what you guys say, I think you'd like me to as well. But anyway, that's all I've got. Great preview season, guys. Seriously, one of the better preview seasons I can remember. So thanks for it. Thanks for all the views too. We got a lot of great views this preview season in terms of just the raw numbers. So I want to take just a second and thank you for that as well. I appreciate you guys being here and watching the videos. I literally could not do this without you, regardless of whether you're a patron or whatever. Just the fact that you're here watching the videos means a great deal to me. Just again, I really, really appreciate it. And I want you to know that, like, not just the standard YouTuber, like, you guys are great. No, like, from the bottom of my heart, I don't know what I would do, right, with my life without you guys. So thank you. But that's preview season for now. It's more or less a wrap. But again, we've got way more to do. So I'll see you guys again soon. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.